Hey, so yeah, this is the first live episode that we're doing of this new iteration of Serial Papers. We'll probably do one every so often because some topics are just so in depth and convoluted and complicated. It would be easier to sort of do them live and hash them out with someone like Donnie Cho. If Donnie Cho says stuff, say hi, Donnie.
Hello.
And
We've
so,
got Lisa Smith. Hey.
oh hey, Lisa. So yeah, that's so Donnie's gonna take your questions and we will address all of them at the end. And he'll definitely interject if I'm doing a terrible job of explaining anything or asking additional questions to help flesh out ideas. Like I said, any great questions, we're going to take them at the end after we've made this little presentation. But yeah, some of these topics are there's so many moving pieces. It's kind of easier to hash them out like this rather than just a simple straight up video. Like the next one's going to be what is cryptozoology, and that's kind of an easy one to record. It's fairly straightforward. So we'll do a couple of those since I basically missed 2 months. I'm going to do a couple of quick videos for August, and then we'll do another one in September. Actually, towards the end of September, you and I are going to be at the Crossing Realms conference.
We will indeed.
Yeah, so it may need
It's
to
going to be a
be.
fun time.
Yeah, it's probably going to be October then. The next live show that we'll do. You know,
Hmm.
it's gonna be fun. We'll give y'all a little extra something though. Trust me, we appreciate y'all. Um, but yeah, for some of these topics, there's just so many moving parts. Doing it live is probably the best way to do. So the question we're going to address today is there is an argument in the Christian circles about a character known as Leviathan that shows up in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, for young Earth creationists, Leviathan is a living creature, probably something akin to a mosasaur, while other theologians and other Christians that would I respect a great deal would say, no, it's an exclusively religious concept. It's a polemic, right? That it's emblematic of it's just Leviathan is the Hebraic name of the chaos dragon, which is used as a way of casting shade both at surrounding cultures, but then also as sort of a stand-in for Satan, right? So the question is Leviathan the chaos dragon, or is it something like a mosasaur? And there's this argument that's going back and forth between both, again, people that I highly regard and respect on both sides of the issue, and they have arguments. So the question we should probably address is what is a chaos dragon? I mean, that feels like an appropriate thing because that's just not something people talk about. Let's be honest. And so the chaos dragon is the sort of primary villain would be the wrong
Hmm.
term, but it is a central figure in what's called the chaos Kampf, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Chaos Kampf or Drachenkampf, because everything's got to be German when you have some of these 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 concepts, right? Nicholas Wyatt describes it as the Chaos Kampf myth is a category of divine combat narratives with cosmogenic overtones, though at times turned secondarily to other purposes, in which the hero god vanquishes a power or powers opposed to him, which generally dwell in or are identified with the sea and are presented as chaotic, distillery forces, which is a really complicated way of saying a god figure, usually like it's not the creator god, it's a chief god figure. This is how the storm god becomes a chief god, though it's not always the storm god. Slays a dragon that is emblematic of the sea of chaos itself, and often there is a creation story involved in it. And the two that we're going to look at the most, that are the most impactful in the biblical narrative are Letanu, aka Lotan, and Tiamat. From we found Lotan from the city of Ugarit, which is a sort of early Canaanite version of the god, and then you have Tiamat, which is from Mesopotamia and that region. But this is a theme that we see pop up a lot in the ancient world. In fact, if you're thinking, "Hey, hold on," a something like a world serpent, this emblem of chaos that's fought by a storm god. If you think that sounds like Zeus going after Typhon or Thor going after going after the world serpent. Yes, I did use Walter Simonson's from trans version of the battle from Marvel Comics for that one, and
Of course you did.
I don't regret anything for that. So if it's like, hey, this sounds kind of familiar, yes, those are all examples of a chaos conf. Now, again, how Norse mythology uses it is very different from how, say, a lot of the Mesopotamians and the Canaanites were using it, but it's all coming out of that same milieu, right? That there's this uh, chaos dragon that's of the sea. It's a world serpent, and it's slain. And like I said, for the Canaanites and for the Mesopotamians and several others in the Mediterranean region, that's also how like the world gets made,
Hmm.
is out of the body of this dragon. So, like I said, there's two that are of particular interest to us, and that would be Latanu, aka Lotan, just depends on who you're talking to, um, and Tiamat. Now, we'll start with Tiamat because it'll make sense here in a second. So, Tiamat is also known as the Shining One, and there's even arguments as to whether or not she's truly a dragon. However, we have seals, cylinder seals, which are literally like these little clay. Um, they look like cylinders, and they have emblems and a story carved into them, and you'd roll them out onto clay, and that would tell the story, right? They were often used as like seals on documents. So one of them that we've actually recovered is literally Tiamat as this dragon and fighting Marduk, right? So Tiamat is the shining one. Keep that in mind. And what happens is Marduk kills her and splits her in two, and she becomes the sky, she becomes the ground, and that's sort of where everything comes from in their mythology. The
Mm-hmm.
other really important figure, and again, it's going to be really important here in a second, is Lotan, aka Latanu. It is a seven-headed dragon. If that sounds really familiar from the book of Revelation, you are correct. It's literally the same thing. So Lotan is is not just the Chaos Dragon. There's this really weird interplay with Yam. So in the Canaanite religion, so this is literally from the Baal cycle. So that's Baal, the storm god, fighting Litanu or Lotan. And what happens is he's technically fighting Yam. Yam is literally the sea. In fact, in Hebrew, Yam means sea. They literally take that word to mean sea.
Hmm.
But Yam is sort of her own goddess, and then Lotan or Litanu is sort of and this is where it gets a little weird because we have a lot of different variants on the story. Sometimes Lotan is her servant. Sometimes Lotan is a sort of an eminence from her, like it's her fighting form. Other times Lotan and Yam are the same figure. It may just be that in her sort of normal goddess form, she's Yam, the sea, and then when she's in fighting warrior mode, she's Lotan or Latanu, the manifestation of the chaos dragon, right? So in these stories, the again Marduk and or Bald in the respective pantheons become the chief god by slaying this chaos dragon, and in in Tiamat's version, she's split in two by Marduk, and in Lotan, his heads are crushed. All seven of his heads are crushed. And so, a lot of again, the theologians that would look at this and say, "Hey, this is clearly what is being referred to here," instead of a living, breathing creature, would point not just to the stories, but the word Lotan or Latanu is literally the origin for the word Leviathan. It's the same word.
Hmm.
And we're going to see here in a second. Let me pop up a couple things. Tell me if these sound familiar. Psalm 74:13, God divided the sea by your might. That's literally the word Yam, and broke the heads of the sea monsters on the waters. Heads, plural. Seven heads for Lotan. Psalm 87:4, I will make mention of Rahab. We'll come back to that. That's also a chaos dragon. We'll come back to all that in a second. And Babylon to them that know me, behold, Philistia and Tyre and Ethiopia, man is born here. So again, Rahab is actually a chaos dragon also. Psalm 89:10, thou hast broken Rahab into pieces as one that is slain. slain, thou hast scattered thine enemies with thy strong arm. That's literally from Tiamat, right? Isaiah 27, in that day the Lord with his fierce sword, mighty and great, will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, Leviathan of the sea. Lotan is the fugitive serpent. That's one of his names. Isaiah 51:9, was it not God who cut the sea monster into pieces and who pierced the dragon? That's straight up Tiamat's story, right?
Mm.
And then we have Isaiah 51:9, again, awake and put on strength, the arm of the Lord, awake as in the Ancient of Days, in the generations of old, thou art not and hath not cut Rahab and wounded the dragon. Again, we got Tiamat showing up. Isaiah likes is using Leviathan and Rahab as shade at Tiamat specifically. And again, it's always a stand-in for Satan. So that seems pretty obvious. It's like, well, this has got to be the same thing, right? And the
But
nail gets
doesn't the original Mesopotamians say that Marduk is the one that splits Tiamat in half, right?
correct. Yes, and
So
so
is he saying that God is Marduk?
no, that's a really great question, and this is a great time to take that. Thank you for that. This is why I got you on the show.
Mm-hmm.
You're not just another pretty face. So what happens in a lot of prophetic writings is stories or emblems of the surrounding deities are mocked by saying this is what God does. And so it's like it's not your God that's actually doing these things, it's our God, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
a way of throwing shade. So it's not saying, hey, Marduk is doing this. Like, no, you guys are worshiping the wrong thing. It's not Marduk, it's actually Jehovah or Yahweh. Again, depending on which version you want to go with. So there's a lot of that sort of shade throwing that prophets do with this kind of language. And where a lot of theologians would hang their hat almost definitively is by the time we get to the Second Temple, right? The Second Temple period, Behemoth and Leviathan are both the names of demonic forces, like straight up. They're not even trying or pretending or claiming they're anything other. Like, no, these are demons, and these are the names of actual specific demons themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people will a lot of theologians hang their hat on these things and say clearly Leviathan is nothing more than a religious polemic to cast shade uh, at these surrounding cultures, but also as a symbol of Satan himself. And it makes a lot of sense as to how they would connect those two concepts, right? Because you're the ancient world, you don't have street lights and satellites and all these things, right? You just have the natural world that you're looking at.
Right.
So, you're looking out over the ocean, this chaotic realm that humans can't go to, right? And what does it look like? Like when you actually see it and it's not all chaotic, it's just you see the sun glistening on it. It looks like a snake. It really does, right? Like the scales are glistening. If you've ever seen I don't know if you've ever seen a snake in person or handled a snake. Like if you get it out in the
Mm-hmm.
broad in the day, like you see like the light dance off the scales, it's identical. So it's easy to see how the ancient world would look at the sea and would look at a serpent and say, hey, we're connecting these ideas. Well, so you go back to Genesis, right? The Nahash, the serpent that tricks Eve, which again in Revelation connects, is the first time that they say in writing, this is the
Mm-hmm.
devil. Well, the thing is, again, Michael Heiser, who takes this view, right? So again, I've done everything but an ad read for Heiser's work. I cannot recommend his work enough. He takes this view that Leviathan is nothing more than this religious polemic. And the reason for that is he's pointed out that Nakash, right, the serpent from the Garden of Eden, is actually a triple entendre, meaning it can be translated as serpent, but it can be translated also as deceiver, diviner, or the shining one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tiamat, the shining one, the water serpent, right? The chaos dragon, the world serpent of the sea that's shining, the fugitive serpent. So it's these same motifs being repeated over and over again. And so they would say, that's Leviathan, we're done. Seems like kind of an open and shut case, right?
Yep.
But here's the problem. It isn't Isaiah or these other Psalms that that creationists like myself and people who delve into cryptozoology, we're not pointing to those and saying those aren't religious polemics. It's specifically Job 41. And I would argue Psalm 104, but we'll come to that in a second. So if it's not this religious polemic, right, what else could it possibly be? What's going on here? And what I would do is I would point to angels. And I'm not saying that the Leviathan of Job 41 is an angel, but what I'm saying is in actually throughout the entire Bible, right? Not just the Old Testament, but even the New Testament, stars are personified, or angels rather, are personified by stars. We even see it in language where they just flat out say stars, they mean angels, right? It's the same thing. Don't worry, Donnie's still around. Um, it's the stars are personifications of the angels. It's a way of talking about the divine
Hmm.
in a way that makes sense poetically. They weren't necessarily saying stars are angels, but rather look at the stars in heaven. They are an example of in a way of exploring the concept of angels in a more tangible way for them to sort of deal with. I would suggest that that's what's happening with Leviathan, and really just Leviathan. Behemoth gets turned into a demon later, but that in what's happening is that there was a species of creature running around the Mediterranean that they encountered, that the ancient world encountered, and the Hebrews said, "Hey, that's Leviathan," and so it becomes this personification of it. Now, again, that sounds like a lot of speculation, and that would be fair. So, before we move forward with this, let's establish one other thing. There are three chaos dragons in the Bible, as we've already run across Rahab, right? So we got Leviathan. That's the proper name. Again, it's literally derived from the Ugaritic lotan or letanu, and it means a wreathed animal and can translate as twisted or coiled. It's the fleeing serpent. You have Rahab, and by the way, Rahab here is not the Rahab from the book of Joshua that was that helped the spies.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different word. It's just phonetically so close to Rahab that when we transliterate it into English, it becomes Rahab, right? And they actually mean similar things as far as meaning broad or wide, like Rahab of Joshua does. So it's not the same person. They're not really spelled the same way, but unfortunately, because of the vagaries of the Semitic languages versus English, it transliterates to being the same way. So it does create a little confusion. A lot of newer translations will actually use it Rahav as a way to try and create a phonetic distance between Rahab and the dragon. So, but Rahab is the second chaos dragon. Again, the word means blusterer, as in prideful, and also broad or wide. And it's obviously indicating pride and arrogance, and it's associated with Egypt in judgment poetry. We'll explain all this in a second. Then we have Tanin. This is the most common word. In fact, it's often translated as dragon. For example, down here it says, uh, "Art thou not it that hath cut Rahab and wounded the dragon?" That's Tanin, right? Was it not God who cut the sea monster into pieces, who pierced the dragon? That's Tanin, right? The Tanin show up in Genesis when God's making the water. He's filling the seas with life. The Tanin are made there. Now, Tanin just means water monster, and it we've found in when it's like talking about Egypt, it's literally referring to Nile crocodiles,
Mm.
right? So Tanin are literally living creatures. We know this for a fact. It just means water monster. So it's any large, powerful creature associated with water. However, it's also used as language for demonic entities, right? Going back to Isaiah, where Leviathan is a stand-in for Tiamat, Leviathan is a sea monster. Tanin shows up in that same section about Babylon because it talks about these water monsters, these Tanin in Babylon. And in fact, there's a lot of argument over how that should be translated. A lot of modern versions will actually use like jackals.
Mm.
But one of the things this is one of the times I think the King James version got it right. They use dragons. because the Septuagint makes it clear these are demonic entities, right? So it's not just that that Leviathan where Leviathan would be like a specific stand-in for Satan and the Chaos Dragon. Tannin are just sort of water monsters in general, but when connected or paired with Leviathan, they become demonic entities of themselves. But this goes back to my point about stars, right? If stars are personifications of angels and a way of exploring them, and we know that Tannin can literally refer to living, breathing creatures, because that I don't think anyone's arguing that Nile crocodiles aren't real living creatures. Why can't Leviathan? So again, okay, is there any other reason to think that Leviathan, again, specifically in Job 41 and Psalm 104, is a specific type of living creature? Well, we have to go back to Behemoth, right? Again, Second Temple period connects Behemoth and Leviathan as demonic entities, so we need to address both of them at the same time. And given that Job is one of the oldest texts that we have, we need to explore how it's being used, right? So God, and I'm going to go ahead and put up Job and Psalm as comparing these two. This is why I think Psalm 104 needs to be put into this sort of question about Leviathan. So in this section of Job, so it's Job 38 through 41, God is coming to Job and it's like, hey, who are you? And he's not asking who are you to question me, but rather he's reminding him why Job believed in God in the first place. Like, why did you put your faith in me to begin with? And he's running down his credentials. And so he shows like, hey, I'm the creator and supervisor of creation, right? Like he created the entire universe. He made it. He maintains it. He maintains how nature is working, including the celestial realm. And then he goes through this list of animals, talking about, who's doing this, how are we doing this? He goes from lions to ravens to wild goats to unicorns, which are actually rhinoceros. Don't worry, we'll do a whole video on it. The wild ox, ostrich, horse, hawk, eagle, behemoth, leviathan. All of those, up until we get to behemoth, no one would argue are not living creatures, right? We all believe in rhinoceros. In fact, we're trying to keep them alive, right? Last time I checked, ravens are real creatures. So are horses. I mean, Donnie, do you not believe in the ostrich?
I believe in the ostrich, Jason.
Oh, see, okay, good. See, this is what I was worried about every so
I have
often.
opened my hearts to the ostrich.
Excellent.
Yes.
And here's the thing, Psalm 104 literally follows the same pattern. In fact, I would put money that Psalm 104, the author is looking to Job and this whole section and sort of shutting it down or compressing it into his psalm, because the theme is identical, right? It's God as creator and supervisor of creation who maintains the workings of nature, including the celestial realm. And then he uses storks, wild goats, rock badgers, lions, and leviathan. So we have two of, and you could even argue that there's some question about the rock badger being maybe tied to one of these other, some of these words we don't really know what they mean, but we'll go with it. But it's like two of those are specifically out of Job, and then storks, ravens, they're both birds. Like it, but then it ends with Leviathan. So they're at the end of these lists of creatures that are preceded by normal, living, everyday animals, right? So let's go back to Behemoth for 1 second, right? I'm gonna throw it up there, and I just realized I have the wrong thing added. Hold on 1 second. This is why. And I swear I thought I grabbed the right one, and I did not. I'm going to pop up Job 40 real quick.
All right.
So we can, so we can sort of just go through it real quick. So he's talking about Behemoth, right? Starting in verse 19. He, meaning Behemoth, is the first of the works of God. Let him who made him bring near his sword. For the mountains yield food for him where all the wild beasts play. Under the lotus plants he lies, in the shelter of the reeds in the marsh. For his shade the lotus trees cover him, the willows of the brook surround him. Behold, if the river is turbulent, he is not frightened. He is confident, though Jordan rushes against his mouth. Can one take him by his eyes or pierce his nose with a snare? Now, again, I actually started a little late on that one. Let's go a little bit higher. So, yeah, there's a whole lot going on here. But again, he says that he made him with us, right? He says that Behemoth, right? I made as I made you. He eats grass like an ox. Behold, his strength is in his loins, and his power and muscles in his belly. He makes his tail stiff like a cedar. His sinews and thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs are like bars of iron.
Hmm.
This is not a metaphorical creature that he's referring to. This is a creature that's living, that eats grass. It lies. What I find really specifically interesting is it lies amongst the lotus. Lotuses are in water, right? He's sort of reclining within the water. Apparently this thing is living a lot of times in rivers and in bodies of water, and it has
Right.
this powerful, very large, long tail. So this sounds a lot like, again, a lot of creationists said this sounds like a sauropod more than anything else. This doesn't sound like a hippopotamus. It doesn't sound like an elephant. This doesn't sound like any creature that we would match up with. Well, again, people like Heiser would say, well, hold on. It's a demon in the Second Temple period. This is probably nothing more than an example of the bull of heaven, right?
Hmm.
It's connected to oxes. So he would say it's the bull of heaven and not something like a sauropod, whereas I would say I think this sounds an awful lot like a sauropod. Well, here's the problem that, as I see it, with the claim that this is like the bull of heaven, is there is no bull of heaven in Hebraic cosmology at all, anywhere. The bull of heaven is found in Mesopotamian and Canaanite religions all over the place, right? In fact, there's bulls of heaven all over the ancient world, but the Hebrew don't have it. There is
Hmm.
no equivalent figure of the bull of heaven. And here's the problem: everyone who has the bull of heaven, he's a bull, right? Like, it's just a bull. Sometimes he's got
Hmm.
wings because he's from heaven and he's divine, so he's got to have wings to fly, right? But 9 times out of 10, it's just a bull. Like, it's not depicted as anything like what we see in Job 40, where it's got
Hmm.
this long, massive tail and it's hanging out in the water and it's just kind of living under these trees in this sort of swampy area, like a sauropod would. So it's completely rendered in Job as a living, breathing, eating creature. It doesn't fit, the concept of the bull of heaven anyway, and it's certainly not depicted as anything other than a bull by any of these other religions that have it. Again, the Hebrews
Hmm.
don't have that in their conception. So that's, for me, we at least, even if you don't think it's a sauropod, we can't say that Behemoth is not a living creature, or at least is not being treated as a created entity that's just hanging out, eating grass. He says and again, this is really key, right? In Job 40, it says, where to go? In 15, behold, Behemoth, which I made as I made you. Well, the ground animals, right, are made on the sixth day with us. All the divine beings were made before, particularly in Job. Job specifically says that the divine beings were celebrating, again, literally the stars, right? That these angels were singing the praises of God as he made the world. We were made
Hmm.
on the sixth day. Behemoth is made with us. That makes it a living creature. It doesn't make it a divine being. So Job is clearly treating this like it's a continuation of the theme from before, right?
Yeah.
We have, where did it go? I just lost it. Yeah. Again, lions, ravens, wild goats, rhinoceros, wild ox, ostrich, horse, hawk, eagle, behemoth. It's it's very clear that this is just another living creature. That's the pattern that Job is establishing as far as the author. So great. We know that some of these things can be personified, some of these languages, some of these names. Is there any reason to think that there's something unknown in our oceans that could fit this Leviathan creature, right? Well, Before anyone gets ahead of themselves, no, maps don't count. When
Hmm.
people say, "Oh, well, look, we have all these dragons on these ancient maps," that's not what they were saying. Those were not creatures that had been seen in that area. They were simply um, saying, "Hey, this is uncharted territory. This is dangerous territory." It's saying, "Be careful." They're not saying that there are whirlpools. It's not saying there are dragons. It's just a way for the ancient map makers to say, "This is a dangerous area. Please take care when you're here because we don't know what's there." Right? That's all that is. But we do have stories, right? Like the U-28 creature. 60-foot long crocodile with webbed feet seen. This happened during World War One. Thing was blown out of the water. Several people saw it, and they reported that they saw this thing that sounds an awful lot like a mosasaur. And I kind of hate dropping this, but in my book, I literally have several accounts of things that sound like water monsters. In Galveston, Texas, in the late 1800s, there were several sightings of a massive aquatic monster. So yeah, we've got plenty of stories of apparently reptilian looking creatures showing up where they
Hmm.
shouldn't be. Now, you can say, well, hold on, those are ancient. They died off millions of years ago. Again, we've had that conversation. We'll have the conversation about the age of the Earth in the future. But sure, you don't like, the idea of a mosasaur. How about Basilosaurus? I prefer the term Zoolodon for the whole sort of broader species because I don't know, it just sounds more whale like. But these were whales, ancient
Yeah.
whales, massive ancient whales, right? I mean, look at those things,
Hmm.
massive teeth. These things were not this was not Flipper that you were dealing with. And the thing is, we have reason to think that something like this is still bopping around. Cadborosaurus, right? This is Cadborosaurus willisi is literally recognized by science. Now we only have a few photographs of the Dayton Harbor carcass that was taken. Unfortunately, we don't have the skeleton because they got rid of it because it was stinking up the place. Right?
Hmm.
This was a creature that has been seen in the water. People talked about it in the Cadboro Bay up in Canada, and they found the body of one in a by some whalers they had captured or they had killed. I think it was I forget what kind of whale it was, and while they were processing the carcass, right, this thing came out of its stomach, and again, it was largely decomposed from the gastric juices, but there was enough of it there. They said, "Hey, this is not anything we know." Now, people have come along later and said, "Oh, well, this is probably a basking shark or something that's just been, sort of twisted up." But the people whose lives depended on knowing the ocean and these creatures, they looked at this and said, "That's not what this thing is. This is weird. This
Hmm.
is just a weird thing." And we have, I'm going to pull up, Katie Elizabeth is easily one of the most important cryptozoologists working today. I have a link to her website below, but I want to share one thing with y'all. Okay, if you go to her website, you can listen to the echolocations she's pulled out of Lake Champlain. It's all here,
Interesting.
right? So and we've got videos that they've taken, but they've got echolocation of 2014, 2018, and recently, literally this year, they've pulled evidence of something in Lake Champlain that's using echolocation. Again, kelizabeth.org. Please go look at what she's done. She's been on all these channels, the Discovery Channel, History Channel. Like she's been
So if
doing
it's
this for
using
a long
echolocation,
time.
it's probably like some kind of like what, like a whale or a dolphin, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's well, again, we don't know of any reptiles that use echolocation,
Hmm.
but so my default would be it's probably some sort of mammal, right? Uh, but there's nothing in Lake Champlain that's supposed to use echolocation, but we have multiple instances of it being recorded, as well as people have talked about something being in Lake Champlain for a very, very long time. So, why am I connecting this? Again, Basilosaurus is nothing more than an ancient form of whale, and whales use echolocations. And by the way, Cadborosaurus, okay. everyone thinks it's a mammal because some people say it has like a mane on the back of its head.
Hmm.
However, is it just me, or does the Cadborosaurus and Basilosaurus seem like they're separated at birth? Seem like they're kind of similar to me, don't they? Doesn't that make sense to you?
Well, yeah, I mean, they look sort of alike.
Yeah, I mean, again, we don't really know. We if we ever catch one, we can, put it up and take a look at it. But it's definitely not a normal. Like, this is not something you mistake for something else. This is something that's running around. This would probably definitely use echolocation, like other whales would. And I'm sorry, if you're on a U-boat in World War I and you blew up a ship and this thing comes flying out of the water and is twisting around, is it a mosasaur that's 60 feet long with webbed feet and all these in the
They think
mouthful?
they say Basilosaurus was from the Eocene, which is
Yeah,
about 41 million years ago.
yeah. Well, there's a lot of things that are running around.
Also, I also read that it's actually one of the most commonly found fossils.
Yeah,
Like they find Basilosaurus fossils everywhere.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, we will when we talk about the flood, we will come back to that concept or that question because that's a really great point. In fact, marine fossils are the most common fossils that are found all over the world. But again, you're in a U-boat. It could be a mosasaur, could it be Basilosaurus? Again, heck, they look kind of they would look kind of similar. And he didn't say it was a mosasaur. He just said it was this crocodile-looking thing,
Right.
right? And so you can say, well, I don't buy the mosasaur because that's a dinosaur thing. But, well, first of all, I'd like to point out we still have turtles and snakes and crocodiles and all kinds of reptiles. And
Here's a quick picture of it, by the way.
Yeah.
The fossils.
Oh yeah, they're massive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. No, they are literally all over the planet. And all of the reasons that something like, again, we keep finding reasons to think these things are still around.
Hey, check out what Brian G says, by the way.
Yeah, what you got?
There was a mosasaur-type creature spotted from a Carnival cruise ship in 2014 that many people saw and watched as it swam next to the ship. You heard about this? Did people take pictures?
No one took pictures, unfortunately.
Oh, man.
I know. But again, so here's the thing. Great. Was it a mosasaur or was it something like Basilosaurus? Unless you get them out of the water and take a really good look, I don't know that most people would be able to tell the difference. Right? So here's the deal. I'm not saying which one it is. I'm just saying we have two very likely candidates for this creature that fills in. And by the way, if you're thinking, well, it can't be a mosasaur because, well, they lay eggs. No, they don't. Like other marine reptiles, they gave birth to live young. At least it's believed that they did. Because there's plenty of other creatures that we know of that we literally have fossilized. In fact, we've had a mosasaur fossilized with its young inside it. Donnie's looking at images, I can tell.
But if you want to go by the standard timeline,
yes,
Mosasaur is late Cretaceous, Basilosaurus is Eocene.
Yep.
It stands to reason that it would be more likely that it would be a Basilosaurus if you follow that timeline.
If you follow, yes. Yeah. If you follow that. However, my point is, we got reasons to think this thing's still kicking around. And then again, we got legit reasons to think this thing's still kicking around. Katie Elizabeth has done the hard work. Again, she's probably the most important cryptozoologist working right now because she doesn't have a bunch of, weird pictures and blurry photos with circles wrapped around them, right? No, she's got actual echolocation that she's recorded. Don't get more impressive than that. That's something. You can't deny that. That is scientific evidence that something is there that's not supposed to be there. So,
you ever meet her?
I have not met her, no.
We should try to get a podcast with her going on.
She's
get her on the show. Oh, she's
too big for someone like. Yeah, she's too big league for me. I don't do it. I don't do that on Siri anymore. You're the most special person that I know, Donnie.
Well, we should talk to like Tex or Rob or the Blondes or something.
Yeah, no, they should. Yeah, Tex should definitely reach out to her. Yeah, we should do a full court press and get her on the channels. Actually, I think Randy interacts with her on her Facebook every once in a while. I've seen him on there. Maybe Randy can get her on.
We'll have to talk to him about
We'll
that.
have to talk about it. Yeah. But so again, back to the point, there is something running around, theoretically, that people have seen that could be either one of these creatures. Again, snakes and turtles and crocodiles are still around. So even if you go with the standard model, right, you've got, there's no reason why it can't be a mosasaur or this. Now, I will say this, though. A lot of people point to, let's go ahead and share. Let's actually pull up the scriptures about Leviathan. Everyone points to, well, it's got to be the Chaos Dragon, right? So let's hop over to Leviathan. So it's talking about, can you draw it out with a fish hook? It's so powerful you can't pierce its jaw with a hook. It's not going to plead with you, right? It's this powerful thing. A lot of people point to this section right here. It says it's breath. Here he goes. Out of his mouth go flaming torches, sparks of fire leap forth. Out of his nostrils come forth smoke as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals and flame comes from his mouth. So a lot of people have said that's clear. This is a fire-breathing creature, right? This is not a living, breathing creature that we're used to. I would point to, I keep pushing the wrong button for that. I would suggest, here's the problem. It's hyperbolic language. Because even someone, again, Michael Heiser and others would say, well, we have all throughout the scriptures this hyperbolic language being used of the fury. In fact, prior to this, when it talks about horses, it says the horse devours distance. Well, they don't really devour distance. Jesus calls himself the vine. He's not in the gate. He's not a vine. He's not a gate. This is poetic language. In fact, there's a large conversation now amongst scholars that when it talks about in Joshua, going back to the concept of Rahab, that
or maybe chemical defense, like Neanderthal woman says.
Like a lot of people people have talked about this. Like it could be something like that. Maybe. I just don't think we even need to bother to argue with it when they will tell you. These same scholars will say when they're in Joshua, it's like, well, you have to wipe everything out. That's actually not literal language. It's poetic. It's like using, like when we say the Dallas Cowboys crushed or annihilated. I wish they would do that, some other team. Not that they've done that in a long time.
As if you watch football. We all know you don't watch sports.
I don't.
But you are in Dallas, so
I am in Dallas.
You are associated with them.
I'm legally obligated to make these claims. Anyway, but we would never say that the Dallas Cowboys went to another city and murdered everyone there, right? It's hyperbolic language. There's no reason to think that this isn't just saying he's talking about how powerful Leviathan is, that its breath is so hot that he's equating it to fire and flames and all of these things. It's just hyperbolic language. Again, I would say that's actually a mark for it being a warm-blooded creature and not a reptile.
Right.
That's neither here nor there. So at this point, it would be fair to say, okay, so is this a real creature or not? Is it both, right? Is the author saying that Leviathan is both a chaos dragon and something like a mosasaur or a basilosaurus? Here's the problem. Either way you answer it, you're kind of having to make an assumption, right? If you think it was, right, it's Leviathan, your argument is that the Jewish authors were not personifying the chaos dragon, because it's clearly a chaos dragon, right? Again, it's got 7 heads over here. The word, it's very clearly being used in place of a chaos dragon in Isaiah and Psalms and other places. So yeah, Leviathan is definitely a chaos dragon, but to assume that it cannot be personified by a living creature, the same way that the ancient authors personified angels as stars, you kind of have to make the assumption that there was nothing in the Mediterranean that they ran across that would be fitting this description,
Hmm.
right? You have to presume that. However, the reverse is also true. You have to claim that it's a personification. You do have to presume that something like this or this was swimming around the Mediterranean and that they saw it and encountered it, and then they used that as a personification of the Chaos Dragon. And the fact that Behemoth and Leviathan are both personal names, like they're not, it's not like saying cattle or wild ox or lion. These are personal names.
Mm-hmm.
It does lend towards this idea that this is the Chaos Dragon that's being alluded to. And I would suggest the problem is, and I think because we have a preponderance of evidence that there is something that survives to this day in the water, whether it's a mosasaur or a basilosaurus is irrelevant. There's something that's not supposed to be here in our waters. There's no reason to believe that they wouldn't have encountered these things and made them a personification. I think that's a valid point, right? And that's where I stand. However, I would suggest that if you're reading Job 41 and Psalm 104, and that's where your brain stops, you've missed the point. Because I do think we're supposed to think about the Chaos Dragon. I think the authors do want us to consider Leviathan not just as a living creature, though it's clearly a living creature, but also we're supposed to think of the Chaos Dragon. That's in the same way that when, again, they talked about stars, you're supposed to think about divine beings. You're supposed to think about angels. When you think about, Leviathan as a living creature, this personification of this weird thing running around that you can't fight, or Behemoth, right, running around this thing you can't fight, you're supposed to think about these things. You're supposed to think about Lotan, and you're supposed to think about these mythological beings. And let me put Job 41 up there again and point to something at the very, very end, right? He sees everything that is high. Let me start with verse 33. On earth there is not his like, a creature without fear. He sees everything that is high. He is king over all the sons of pride. We are supposed to see him, to see Leviathan as this thing that is connected to Lotan, that is the Chaos Dragon, that is ultimately the serpent from the beginning of the story, right? It doesn't negate this factor. And we should take this. Yes, I think it was a living creature that Job is pointing to. But we're supposed to see this thing ultimately. We're supposed to see this ancient enemy that is haunted humanity from times immemorial and is the embodiment of chaos and is ultimately destroyed by God at the end. This isn't an either or story. If you stop with, hey, this is evidence of dinosaurs, you've literally missed the point of what's being said. I do think that's part of the story. I'll defend this one. I know that, again, someone like Heiser who's passed and who I respect a lot, and there's a lot of people running around who I respect a lot who would say, no, that's crazy. No, it's not crazy. It just makes atheists uncomfortable. However, I think where we can agree on is if you stop there, you've very much missed the point. Everything's about the greatness of God in the Bible. This is a creature that mankind can't stop, and ultimately we can't stop death. We can't stop chaos. That's a God thing. And the reason that Son of Pride is so important at the end is, remember how I said Lotan is sometimes Yam and sometimes it's the servant of Yam, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is where it becomes important. So Leviathan is it's the embodiment of chaos, right? It is the Chaos Dragon. It's the embodiment, but it's also Satan himself. Rahab, as I mentioned, is this other Chaos Dragon figure that's usually applied to Egypt as a concept, right? So it's Rahab becomes, instead of just using Leviathan again, Rahab is sort of filling the role of Yam from this story here, from the story of Baal. So Rahab is the idea of pride, right? Bluster, boldness, and it gets put on it because God is saying your pride is going to be destroyed, just like Rahab was, just like Yam was. So, and again, this is a complicated issue. There's a lot of moving parts here, and this is why people associate Satan with pride, because these themes that we miss in English, and because this is not our original culture, we miss these elements, we miss these allusions in this conversation that the text is having. But where do we in the cryptozoological world, where do we fall? Those of us who are Christians and cryptozoologists, and we fall on this creationist side. Yeah, absolutely. Leviathan's a creature, right? If you want to say it's a mosasaur, more power to you. You think it's a basilosaurus, that's great too. Maybe it's something we haven't even discovered yet. Groovy. Just don't leave it there, because it's so much more, and there's a bigger message that God is giving us. Now, on that note, Donnie, let me have, or do we have any questions you think that would, or do you have any questions or any questions from the audience that we may want to wrestle with to kind of iron out ideas or concepts on this?
Well, Neanderthal woman just mentioned Heiser also thought that the giants were just 6 feet tall.
Yeah, and okay, so the reason for that, and I actually will do a video on this. I have it in some of my books. So the Septuagint, which looks to be in certain areas a little more accurate, in regards to certain translations, it has them as 4 cubits instead of 6. But I actually reconcile that because the weight of the armor and of the spear don't change. Only the lengths do of the measurements. And I would suggest the reason for that is not that the Masoretic text enlarged Goliath. Rather, what they were doing when they were translating it from Hebrew into Greek, they standardized the cubits, because we all have this idea that the cubit is only 18 inches long, right?
Yeah.
The problem is there were different kinds of cubits. There was like the standard cubit, which actually for the Hebrews was like 17 and a half inches. But then there were royal cubits and divine cubits. There are examples of cubits that get over 25 inches long. So I would suggest what happened is the reason translated into Greek was the Greek language was becoming the main language, and there were a lot of Hebrews who couldn't read Hebrew anymore, right? A lot of these Israelites were being Hellenized. And so instead of saying, well, hey, we kind of need everybody to have this deep understanding of the different kinds of cubits, and when they're used, we're just going to standardize all the cubits so they're all the same length. But that would require the changing of the measurements, right? So I think everyone just sort of said, okay, if it's in the Bible, it's a divine cubit. And so when we get to Goliath, that's why we have it cut down to 4 cubits instead of, because it even says in the text, according to the cubits of a man, rather than, like, say, the divine cubit that was probably used for the Ark of the Covenant. And the temple, it says very specifically in Samuel that it was the cubit of a man. So the Greek, or the translators who were the rabbis who were translating into Greek probably said, hey, let's just use let's just say everyone's going to use the divine cubit that's 25 inches or 22 inches, whichever one they were using. I give different calculations for all, and they went with that. So yeah, I would disagree with Heiser on this one. And the reason is, I think there's a better explanation as to why that discrepancy actually exists, rather than just they got it wrong in the Masoretic text. Again, I do agree that 9 times out of 10, I think the Septuagint's a better rendering of a lot of different things. I just don't think this is one of them. And I think the reason for the discrepancy is easily explained away. Well, not easily, but, it's an understandable explanation. So it's not a mark against him. I just think that's a consideration most people don't have. Because again, a lot of this comes down to, if you believe, to your point, right? If you think this thing went extinct, 100 million years ago, or this thing went extinct,
like 14 million.
or I think when it supposedly went extinct like 30 or 40 or 14 million years ago. Either way, if you think they went extinct millions of years ago, then they can't be then the Hebrews couldn't have run across them, right?
Right.
That would be the assumption. The problem is you're working from the assumption that this thing ain't still flopping around.
Right.
Now, again, the problem is the reverse is true. We're assuming that it is and that they came across it. So whether you think, whichever one you come down to on one level is fundamentally based on your assumption. And this is both sides. This isn't but this version has a better argument. No, both arguments are we are assuming one or the other. But like I said, just don't leave it at, if it's a dinosaur, don't leave it there, because that's not the point. However, again, 104, right? We compare, in fact, I've got it right here. In Psalm 104, it says, Lord, this is verses 24 through 29. Oh Lord, how manifold are your works in wisdom how manifold are your works. In wisdom have you made them all. The earth is full of your creatures. Here is the sea, great and wide, which, by the way, that great and wide, that's literally Rahab, which teems with creatures innumerable, living things both small and great. There go the ships and Leviathan, which you formed to play in it. These all look to you to give them their food in due season. When you give it to them, they gather it up. When you open your hand, they are filled with good things. And when you hide your face, they are dismayed. When you take away their breath, they die and return to their dust. Rahab is there and Leviathan is there. And they're not something that's out of order. They are both there. Because again, Rahab is a chaos dragon, but it's the sea, right? As a poetic allusion. And when it's ascribed to like a nation, like Egypt, it's a judgment. However, in this case, like Rahab's a good thing. It's the sea. Leviathan, it's just another creature flopping around in the water, eating and dying, right? This is... Again, should we think of the Chaos Dragon whenever you see the word Leviathan because it's a proper name? Yes, 100%. Because they saw this. They made these illusions. They told these stories, and they translated them to be the devil as a way of explaining these concepts that they're seeing. But if there was a creature or family of creatures that they ran across, they would have personified them and said, that's Leviathan out there, just like these stars. In which case, when that's their name for them, hey, that thing's out there. It's eating, it's breathing, it's doing what normal animals do, but it's so powerful, it's like Leviathan to us. And so it becomes a way of explaining it and dealing with that topic. So it's one of those things where to claim that is not the case is based on the assumption that they're not alive. And as Katie Elizabeth has pointed out, we've got some really good reason to think that something that we believe has been extinct for millions of years ain't as extinct as we'd like it to be.
There's monsters in them oceans, Jason. We got to watch out.
Oh, we do.
In them water. We got Bigfoot in the forest. We got these.
We got Leviathans in the seas.
Leviathans.
Yeah. We got pterosaurs in the sky. Ain't nobody safe. Ain't nobody safe.
We got T-Rex in Alaska.
I would push the doubt on that one, but we'll see. Who knows? No one actually lives in Canada. I mean, no one actually lives there, so there could be anything up there. We don't know. All right. Any other questions, Donnie? Before we
not really. I mean, haven't really seen much in terms of questions. We got K-pop on the TV. Oh, Nemovir decides to show up right at the end.
Yeah. Well, Nemovir going to Nemovir.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we do have K-pop on the TV. That's how you know it's the end of the world.
Yes. And we will be discussing that further on my show, guys. So
yes, we will. We will take care of that next week for you.
Yes.
On his channel, because that is where conversations like that are kept.
Yep.
So there you go. All right. So again, sounding like a broken record, but whatever side of the fence you come down on Was the Leviathan specifically from Job 41 and Psalm 104? Was a living creature that they used to personify as Leviathan as the chaos dragon? Maybe. If that's what, if you think the evidence is solid for that, go with it. You don't, we're still brothers. There's no problem here. I would just advise that if you are on my side and you think, yeah, there's a reason to think that this was a living, breathing creature, they were regarding it as that, don't stop there. There is a bigger message being told. There is a bigger story, and that story is worth knowing and understanding, because the Bible is worth knowing and understanding in its fullness. On that note, I bid you adieu. Donnie Cho, thank you for saying stuff with me, and we'll catch you next time.
Boys.